No mai, haere mai, ki Aotearoa Rugby Pod, brought to you by Ashley and Martin Medical Hair Centres, and we've got a new segment for them this week, The Turning Point, we'll get into every week, but there's so much to talk about. What a wonderful opening round of Super Rugby. Is it the best ever? We've crunched the numbers. We'll come back to you on that in just a couple of minutes. Chiefs upsetting the Blues, Crusaders back in the game, 3 Aussie sides winning it, and you wouldn't believe how long it's been since those 3 Aussie sides all won on the same weekend. It's been some time. We've got some unhappy Highlanders fans with us that we've got to address. We haven't covered them enough. We'll get a little bit into that as well. The Six Nations coming up with no Warren Gatland. Bit of chat about that as well. And Warren Gatland's son, of course, will appear in this show quite heavily, as well as the picking comp and your emails and your comments. Let's just get straight to that, Jipper. James Parsons, one of the most entertaining parts of the weekend.
I was inundated Sunday morning on Instagram from all and sundry of this big barnstorming first 5'8" walking right over the top of Bryn Hall.
By the name of Bryn Gatland?
Bryn Gatland. It could not have been better. Bryn versus Bryn. And how's the body, mate?
Body's fine, mate. It's just more so the mental, to be honest. I think you'll probably be getting about 30, 40 clips of just that getting sent to me. It was tough. But yeah, I think, look, I think when you can get bumped over by ARP, it's a lot easier to be able to take that on the chin. But when it's Bryn Gatland, I seriously had to have a think to myself around, do I want to keep doing this? Because, he's like 85 kgs dripping wet. Brenner, good on you, mate. But hopefully not ever again by that, mate, by Bryn Gatland.
If you look at the background too, Sean Stevenson, who's your teammate, was laughing.
Bro, I could hear Shooter laughing. That's the funny thing when I got up. I could hear Shooter laughing and I put my head down and not even looked at Bryn. Bryn's literally looked at me straight away and I've just put my head down and like, nah, mate.
And Bryn got a try too in that win.
And a hug from Malcolm Marks.
And a hug from Malcolm Marks. The jealousy.
Stole my hug.
Can you tell Jipper how it feels to get a hug from Malcolm Marks? How good that feels?
It uplifted me after knowing I got bumped off. He just came in and gave me that little bit of love that I needed. So no, it's big. There's a lot of it going around. So he definitely doesn't miss you. He gets your whole body, and so yeah, it was nice to get a wee little touch from Malcolm, which was nice.
For Bryn Hall, next weekend completely. But an incredible weekend of the opening weekend as Super Rugby. So we crunched the stats. Is it actually the greatest weekend ever? I suppose how do you measure that is probably the big question. Is the opening weekend of all time in '96 the greatest because of all the hype? Or could it come down to how many close games there are in that opening weekend? So, an average points differential of 4.6 per game. We had to go all the way back to 2012 to go lower than that with an average points differential of 4.4, and you have to go all the way back to 1997 from that for the next best, which was 3.25 in the opening round of 1997, which Jip would make that probably the closest and most competitive weekend ever, but Jesus was close.
Oh, it's so good in the sense that I think for a number of years everyone's always said, it's too predictable, you know who's going to win, and I suppose that unpredictability of results engages more eyes than not. So it's an exciting start. The key now is remaining, I suppose, healthy, all the players remaining healthy, all the depth in the squad being tested still manages to keep things as tight as that. But yeah, it was good viewing, apart from obviously the last 40 minutes at Eden Park.
That was a tough time for you.
It was. I tell you what, some of the key All Blacks really stood up. It was an impressive display from the Chiefs.
Yeah. What do you think happened in that second half to the Blues, Brenner?
Oh, look, I just think the Chiefs really outblues the Blues, really. I thought the physicality area, I don't know if there was a message throughout the week that they wanted to try and win collisions, but man, that breakdown area, it was brutal the whole night. Now, I know obviously there weren't points scored in that first half, but that collision area, I was looking at it and thinking, geez, this is week one, and the boys were flying into it on both sides. But if you do look at the stats a little bit in that last 20 minutes for the Blues, they had 5 penalties. There was a yellow card based around there, which probably changed the game a little bit. They made almost 100 tackles, just under 100 tackles in that last 20 minutes, and they had 6 turnovers during that 20 minutes. So look, those kind of numbers are really hard in terms of being able to try and win a game.
We've spoken about when teams went into their 22 last year, it was very hard to come away with 3 or 5 points, and that's what we saw in the first half. But I think that emptied the tank. And then the impact off the bench from the Chiefs. And we praised Harry Plummer in that final series last year around the kicking game and not overplaying his hands. Obviously, the Blues had 14 turnovers to the Chiefs 6, so they were very smart in the way they played. And obviously the Cortez try saver, I think that was a turning point. Mark not getting that try maybe would have made them question things a bit more, but I think it was a 50-22. The way Cortez sort of controlled the kicking game and let Damien play his running game really sort of put them in the right position to force the Blues to make something happen, and it forced errors and forced further penalties. And I suppose that discipline would probably be the deciding factor of the loss for me, because of the way it put them under pressure in that first 40 to make a lot of tackles. I mean, 240 tackles at 85%, 280 odd, sort of attempted. So, I mean, it's very hard when you're getting into those numbers that you're going to come away with a result and be able to, I suppose, have enough energy in that final 20 minutes to win a game.
Like, you look at probably the last two tries, obviously Cortez at Artima was a big part. Jip touched on the bench coming on. Thought his game management, you talk around the try scoring, saving ability, that was awesome. But I thought his game management role and when to use the ball was really good. Like the scrum, obviously there was a numerical advantage and they scored off that, but they did really well in and around those close collision areas to be able to tighten the Blues up. And then when they pulled trigger with Damien McKenzie's second try, it was really good game management and balance. So
I think it's worth acknowledging Xavier Rowe as well. The pressure and the knowledge of the new rules, to know as soon as the hand's on that he could pressure Funaki. He did it a couple of times and it was almost confusion as to the Blues were looking for that penalty, but those new rules in place, and I suppose that just showed where the Chiefs were. They maybe just had a little bit of a step ahead, and that probably paid the difference.
And just on that, I'm really glad that you touched on Xavier Rowe there, Jip, because I thought his first half was tremendous in terms of, you talked around the pressure they're putting on Funaki and understanding the rules, but his game management was outstanding in terms of his box kicks, his execution around that. He had a couple of little attacking kicks that put the Blues back into that 22 metres in the exit area. So you talk around a 1-2 punch with Cortez Ratima coming on and Xavier Rowe, who started very well. You have to think that they've probably got one of the best 1-2 punches going around at the moment. So I'm glad that you did bring that up. And also just around what you touched on there, Jip, and whether teams have figured it out or have a better understanding of the Blues. Like watching on TV, and sometimes when you did see it from a higher version, a higher angle, you did see that the Blues, because they have that going through the mindset, their whole team was pretty much within the sideline to the first or the second post. So, like, if you're looking and you're seeing that, if you can get those collision areas and being able to tighten them up, you saw them going back to that short side, and you're really only defending half of the field. So, whether teams are going to see that and being able to continue to keep putting pressure around that area because they're so short on the field, or whether now it's a good solution for the Blues where they might need to open up their attack and just spread it a little bit wider to open up those defensive lines, which we probably didn't see on the weekend.
Yeah, but I think we saw it in AJ Lamb's try, and I really liked, and I spoke about seeing Rico Ioane being able to get on the outside, and he drew Boshier in. And that's what I mean, that pace to make that edge defender come in, that freeze mark up, and then good inside line, following up on the inside line from AJ Lamb led to that try. So I think when they had the opportunity to take it, they did. But too often when they had the ball, I suppose those errors came a little bit early around trying to go through the front door first before they gave those guys opportunity. But you can see there was definitely a growth in and around that. And I think, probably the comms of someone like Bodie from 15 is a big part of that as well.
Okay, that leads us to our next question from Chris Minto via email. Team, I'm confused. Why was Beauden Barrett playing at 15? I was at the game and loved the energy and enthusiasm he was bringing, but they needed that energy and enthusiasm and his wisdom in controlling the team. To me, Beauden is my 10 for the Blues and the All Blacks. At 15, he doesn't get enough opportunities to direct the game. The Blues need to do a U-turn on this one. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think it's a respect element to Harry Plummer and what he did in the driver's seat. And I also think injuries to Stephen Petafeta and Zahn Sullivan, I think you need Harry and Beauden on the field if you've got that opportunity. But I think once Stephen Petafeta and Zahn Sullivan come back, there will be more opportunity for Beauden to move into that 10 spot.
So do you feel like it's more likely that you'll have Petafeta at 15 and Beauden at 10?
Stevie will potentially have to come off the bench because, again, I think Harry deserves. He's got some credit. He's got a bit of, I suppose, money in the bank as such. And I don't think he had a terrible game, as Bryn sort of alluded to. Like, I think the match was won up front and they didn't quite get the platform that they were looking for.
No, I don't think it's panic stations. Like, Terry's a great player, and like Gyp said, when it comes to money in the bank, if that forward pack can just get him a little bit more service and they can win a little bit more of the collisions, then his game management side will take over, and you've got Beauden at the back who can also be able to come back in to the first 5 in the last 30 minutes with maybe what we saw with Damien McKenzie and how he changed the game when he came into 10.
There's a couple of other things that came out of that game. I was sitting in the stands for that game that made me kind of I suppose, question a few things. One was the streakers. There were numerous streakers, one in particular that stopped play. And it was quite amazing to me that the crowd really enjoyed that. The play stopped and the crowd loved the fact that this guy was on the field with no clothes on and didn't care that the play had stopped. So I'm really interested in a player's perspective, because my first thought was, you guys are doing work. This is your business. I wouldn't want a person running naked through our office, taking me away from what I'm trying to achieve. Someone running through here right now. What do you feel as a player seeing that happen, and how does it affect you on the field?
I think you have to see it, for one. Like, crowd roaring, you don't know what they're roaring at, because you hear that all the time. But one thing I'd say, if I'm being authentic and genuine, if I'm under the pump, bring them on. If I'm thinking about my team, it's like, because it stops game, like it stops that flow of momentum. I think it cut to Clayton McMillan, who was fuming that they were out there, because you could tell that the momentum was with the Chiefs. And I think it just, obviously it's not ideal. Like, you don't see it in the NFL, you don't see it in sort of other global sports. I don't think it's a good look, and I don't think it's a great thing. But if I'm thinking genuinely as a competitor and I'm stretched defensively and I'm under the pump, then it's probably going to help me out on that stage. But if we're playing on top of the team and it comes on and stops that flow, I'll be fuming.
Yeah. Now, Brynner, you always talk about how the Crusaders have got a plan for absolutely everything. Did you guys have a plan for that?
They planned the streakers.
You planted them.
Yeah, we planned them to be able to come on when we're inside our 22 defending. That was a plan that we kind of touched on with the locals down in Christchurch. No, not really, to be honest. It's and to come to your question, Ross, you talked about, does it really affect you? It actually doesn't really. Like, it's kind of just a moment to reset, and everybody else will more so just come in collectively and have a deep breath and, I guess, move on to what the next task is. So, to be honest, it's probably more fun if you're on the bench, really, for a bit of funniness. Like, you just see kind of the streak happening as it comes, and you're also really wondering if the security guard's going to make a good tackle. That's what you're kind of thinking for a little bit of a joke, but it's not good obviously for people to do that, and for people on TV and stuff. But that's probably the thoughts behind the old streakers.
And that takes us to our turning point of the week with Ashley and Martin. Regrowing hair with Ashley and Martin can be a real turning point in the confidence of many young men. So this week's turning point, it's hard to go past the Crusaders after last year. We saw a completely different side in round one. Brynner, do you think that the Crusaders have turned a corner?
Yeah, they did. Look, I just think having all those guys on the field at the same time was just big for them. And look, they're probably a little bit scary in terms of being 14-0 down, and you could have been thinking around the horrors of last year and having that kind of the back of your mind. But to their credit, they were able to find a way and been able to just to grind it back. And look, I thought, what's his name? Kyle Preston coming on. Look, considering that Noah Hotham went down, to be able to have the involvements that he had. And it's not just the fact that he did score his 3 tries, but to be able to just be in there like another cog on a wheel, to be process-driven and being able to get things right in a lot of areas, not just his scoring the tries, but I guess it's a credit to that environment, to how he was able there to go out and perform. But I think, look, the involvements of Will Jordan and David Havili were massive for that Crusaders team on the weekend. Look, I think of the 5 tries I think they scored, look, Will and David were pretty much in, and one of them were involved in those tries. So, and I think having Ethan Blackadder there for that steal, and Scott Barrett again, they were able to win that physicality battle and having that leadership roles for them. So they did really, really well, Ross, considering the tough start that the Hurricanes put them under. And I think having Will Jordan and David together, they'll be big pieces for the Crusaders if they want to go far into this tournament.
Their body's in motion to the line. Like, if you use the Kyle Preston's first try for Will Jordan to get that nifty little inside ball between the inside forward runner, man, it was like in motion, and defenders they were forcing defenders the whole time to make decisions, and I suppose we didn't see that for 80% of the games last year, and it didn't make defences having those issues. And then obviously reading pitches, I thought David was probably the key. Like, Will stood out, but I think David Havili, man, you just do not understand how much they probably missed him last season when he wasn't available. And I suppose it takes the pressure off Taha Kemera, because I was surprised that O'Connor didn't start. But in the end, it actually worked out well, because Noah Hotham went off. I think Kemera and Preston played together in age grade, and I hate to do a Ben Darwin, but they were pretty cohesive. for someone that you'd think is on debut, I think that synergy actually helped both players perform their role. But I think it was off the back of Dave's communication, vision, and then I think the cherry on top was Will just was in top flight form, and they're certainly back, and they're certainly back up front. I think Moananu as well, like young hooker, sort of just got that final spot. Man, that was a huge performance for set piece wise. We all know he can carry, he can tackle, but for a young man in a big derby match like that to deliver the platform that we're so used to from the Crusaders, I think he deserves a big thumbs up. I'm keen to hear your thoughts, Bryn, on what you saw around that rule, around the breakdown, not being able to touch the 9 within the metre, because if you look at the lightning quick ball stats, like pretty much I think 10 out of 11 teams were in the 65 or above, which is extremely high, and I feel like players aren't necessarily spending as many bodies at that breakdown because halfbacks aren't worried about just getting in there and getting the ball because they can't be touched, they can't get an arm, and it just felt like, man, the game was just played at so much pace. And then there wasn't a lot of kicking, but the ball in play, the Blues were at 42 minutes, the Crusaders at 39. That's a big difference, and I genuinely feel it's in and around that breakdown rule of the 9.
It is, and we're playing it a little bit up here, and I think it's more so like defensively, you've got to be able to win your collision. The second man who is on the ball, you've got to be able to try and slow down the ball in terms of that's winning the collision, to be able to land on top or being able to hold him up and stack him for that 3 to 4 seconds to try and slow down the ball, or it might even be holding an elbow to be able to try and not get that ball presentation. So it's been a big focus point for us to be able to try and slow down the ball, because when you're at halfback, like for me, when I'm going to a ruck, I know if you do a little bit of game management and there's someone that's in and around that area, you're pretty much going to get a penalty. Then that leads in to be able to line out more. If you've got a dominant set piece, it's hard to defend from there. So I just think the collision area of the 2v1, the tackler who's going low, and the arrival of the secondary tackler, really important in terms of trying to slow down the ball.
But I think also those forward defenders are hesitant in Super Rugby because it's they don't know when they can get the halfback or not, and there's quite a bit of, I don't know, it seemed every game the halfbacks were just running amok in terms of the pace of the ball, and not necessarily off good carries.
So you're able to go for the ball, not touching the 9. If you're actually looking to be able to pick the ball up, then actually you're not going to really get penalised for it. So there will be a little bit of milking through the 9, but if you do want to try and get the ball, there still is that element if you are trying to actually physically try and pick up the ball instead of trying to counteract the 9.
Yeah, I think if you're in a good position, jackal position, we still saw that. But I think when there's a take the carry out of it, but the cleaner sort of tackles the tackler, and then there's that moment where you could probably put your hand out, and you see it in the NBA. You're not allowed to. You can go for the ball, but 9 times out of 10 they're going to say it's a foul. And I think there's just that hesitancy. If you reach out and try and slap the ball, which is okay, you'll still get penalised, I think. And I think they'll get better as the season goes on, but I think it's quite an interesting. I didn't think it would have that much of a shift. Like 76%, the Hurricanes in terms of lightning quick ball. That is if you were a forward, that is a massive day. Like you were patting yourself on the back to provide that platform. But not saying it wasn't them. I'm just saying I think this new rule has given the confidence to the halfbacks to just get in there and get that thing out.
And for the Crusaders, it appeared to give Levi Almore a little more space to get back to the form, I suppose. We saw him in not last year, the year before with Moana Pacifica. Bryn, we've had an email through from Finn Brown, and he was looking at the midfield options at the Crusaders, and he wondered whether it was Havili and Almore or will McLeod and Enor play a role in there. Do you think that the Crusaders have found their duo at 12 and 13 off the back of what you saw on the weekend?
I definitely think they've got their 12. I think Davey's captain, he's been there for a long time, so I think it's going to be based in and around him with who the other 3 are going to be. You've got Dallas, Braden, and you talk around Levi, but you can't forget that Levi and Davey have played a lot of rugby together at Tasman, so there is that obviously that confidence that they could have through that relationship. I think Braden's played a lot with Davey. Dallas has obviously played a lot with him over the years as well. But what I really did enjoy about Levi, he just looked a lot more comfortable than he was last year. Look, he probably was in a different team on Moana, and it's run probably a little bit differently in terms of what's required you as a centre and probably what's required and what they're wanting in your role as a 13 at the Crusaders. So he looked confident, he looked slim. Geez, he looked very, very fit. So I think there were words around him in the pre-season wanted to be really fit, get nice and light and being able to have those second and third efforts. And so I was really impressed with how he went. And what I did enjoy about him, was their line speed. It seems like he's got a license in that defensive system to be able to go out and get someone. So if you're on the other side of the ball though, and you're looking to be able to try and attack the defense of the Crusaders, because they showed a lot of line speed, and a lot of it sometimes is a little bit reckless in terms of trying to shut that ball off to like maybe what the South Africans were to put your skill set under pressure. So if I am probably on the attacking side and playing against the Crusaders, if you can get that right and being able to get around that disconnection through them or maybe around them, it's something that probably could be looked into.
Yeah, and I think Devery's second try probably showed that. You know, like they bit quite hard. I know they were in the 22, but they were never going to get that jam tackle, you know, and it just sort of freed up Naholo to free up, you know, a little bit too easy. So I think there's still some teething issues, sort of like when we spoke about England, they were sort of getting a lot of tries, but once they get their rhythm and they know each other and they get the right communication, I think it will be effective because they look fit. They look like they can run that style of defence time and time again, but you just don't want to get caught halfway house. You've got to know you can get that person, otherwise you've got to just use the sideline as your friend.
Right. Now, of course, we mentioned earlier that Will Jordan was phenomenal in his return to the Crusaders. I caught up with Will a couple of weeks ago, and this is what he had to say. Well, good summer for you?
It's been good, yeah. Probably a little bit more chilled out than what it usually is. 8 weeks have gone pretty quickly, but yeah, a couple of friends' weddings, bit of time on a boat. Not so much sun in the South Island, but yeah, hard to complain. It's been a good break.
Yeah, 8 weeks. Do you still get into a bit of running and all that kind of stuff? You've got to stay on top of it.
Yeah, you still tick it over. We've got the Bronco, the fear of that, on your toes a little bit, anxiety of it perhaps. So yeah, try and tick it over. Like you might have a week or two off when you first come back, but then yeah, try and tick over probably 3 runs and probably 3 gyms in a week. Try to get a ball in hand a little bit and remember how to catch and pass and kick and all that. So no, you want to still tie yourself over without while still giving yourself the mental break that you kind of need.
Right, so you've got Nick Gill just in your ear a little bit on Christmas Day, like you're just thinking...
You've got the fear of it is just there, it's real. So yeah, you got to remind yourself a little bit. There's a bit of an art to it, like, remember your first long or extended break you have as an All Black. It's a bit challenging working out, you know, how much to train and where to find the bits and pieces, and you've only got a couple of weeks before you come back into Super Rugby in round 1, so it is a bit of an art. Haven't necessarily got it all figured out, but I've done a few now, so we'll find out next week, but hopefully it's going to plan.
Yeah, because I suppose you don't want to blow it too early either, do you? Like you don't want to be at a peak early.
Yeah, I mean, you want to come back in good physical shape so you're ready to play, but mentally you want to be able to get through to end of November as well. If you're in the All Blacks, so it's a long season, so you've got to switch off and take time with family and friends. But yeah, just keep the wheels ticking over is probably the main.
Obviously there was the Crusaders element, which wasn't quite as good, but the way that you came back into the All Blacks, you must be relatively happy with the way that season finished for you on a personal level. Yeah,
I think like when I unfortunately had to have surgery in February on my shoulder, I was looking at 5 to 6 months out, you're kind of wondering what the year's going to look like. So pretty gutting to miss the Crusaders season. Some obvious issues there, which were tough to be on the sidelines for, but on a personal level, we were able to come back into the All Blacks and be a part of that group. And again, it wasn't a season that went completely smooth sailing or to plan, but felt like we got to a good spot around the way we were playing the game, and the way we were able to play in the India tour was, I think, positive for what's moving forward. So for myself, I was able to finally play a bit of rugby at fullback, which was cool. Again, not perfect, but enjoyed the challenge that brought, and felt like with each week I was getting better and starting to learn more about it. So pretty pumped up about what this year can bring for me, but also the teams I'm involved with, starting off with the Crusaders.
But what did you learn from Test fullback play that you can take into your Crusaders fullback play this year?
You're doing a lot of the same stuff. Like I don't think there's any magic formula to it or anything that you're required to do differently, but I think it's just the magnitude of it. Like at Test rugby, everything's amplified, so little wrong decisions there, execution there shows up more. So I guess what you're trying to do is bring that increased accuracy or importance you have on your skill set back to the Super game and try and keep your standards up there. So it's been a while since I played Super Rugby, so I'm excited to get stuck in. It's usually pretty free-flowing rugby, particularly to start the year, so that's something that excites me, and hopefully get a bit of ball in hand and we can start the season off well.
Is there quite a good vibe around? I mean, we've had David Havili named this week, popular guy, everyone must be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I think, well, Davey's a great mate of mine, someone that I'll certainly follow onto the field. Yeah, brings a bit of toughness to the group, I think. He's someone who can be pretty uncompromising around his standards that he sets and what he demands from the group, which I think is exactly what we need coming off a season where we struggled. But at the same time, yeah, likes to enjoy life, has a lot of laughs and enjoys himself too. So I know he'll bring a great balance of fun, but also hard work and the bit of grit you need. And there's a lot of motivation to try and right what happened last year from the players through management through to coaches. So it's an exciting year for us, a bit of a different kind of mindset heading into it from the bottom of the pack. And yeah, we're looking forward to trying to challenge a few teams and get back to where we were.
No one wants to have a bad year, but you've been through a lot of good years. Is it in a weird way an interesting new challenge for you to do something quite different?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not a position you want to be in, but yeah, when you've been playing the game for a while, you take any mental spin you can and try and take something from it. So the idea of, yeah, going out and chasing the Blues and taking them on and, yeah, trying to prove yourself again, I think is not necessarily a bad mindset for us to be in. Brings a bit of freshness to it. And, yeah, we know that last year wasn't up to standard. So hopefully the guys who got opportunities last year were able to get some more experience, get some minutes. That would have held them in good stead, and we're looking forward to seeing how they bounce back and yeah, show their best rugby this year.
There were moments, I think people were very hard on the Crusaders last year. There were moments, obviously, where there were large amounts of injuries, and we saw when Scott Barrett and we saw when Ethan Blackadder came back, there was, suddenly things got going again, and then, there were injuries and whatever else, and then it made it difficult. Those elements outside of that, the gameplay, where you saw the Blues being very physical, being kind of direct and kicking, do you feel like those elements are going to seep into the other teams for this season?
Yeah, I think to start off with the first point you made, like, the rugby is a game of small margins, so like you say, you don't have to be too far off to be a little bit off in the result. So for us, I think it's about not trying to reinvent the wheel this year, not completely throwing out the playbook and trying to rip it up and do something different. I think in terms of the Blues, like, they played a really impressive style and used their big ball runners to great effect. I think we've always had that element with our forwards, particularly around the set piece, scrum time, and Maul in particular have been a real weapon for us. So we'll look to use that, but at the same time, like, we want to be able to use our back three, use our backs in general, the likes of Davey, his skill set. We saw Sevu Reece had a great year last year. Was playing some scintillating rugby. So we want to try and get him involved. So I think you adapt to the conditions as well. Like in February, March, the sun's out. Games are, when it's still light, that probably plays that style a bit more. And as you start to get to May and June, whether you're at Apollo Project Stadium in Christchurch where it's pretty cold and wet, then naturally the kicking, the more physical confrontations become important. So I think you've got to adapt your game throughout the year, but at the same time, it's important to have a style and something you can lean back on. And I think for us, like, our set piece has always been important, and I think the ability to strike has been key as well.
Now, I just want to know, because Bryn Hall obviously isn't here right now, I've heard talk about him being messy in the changing rooms. I've heard all sorts of things. As his flatmate or former flatmate, what did you make of his, his ability around the house, making sure things ran well? Was he a flatmate of high note? Where is he?
Yeah, it's disappointing that Bryn wasn't on tonight. I would have enjoyed seeing his lovely face on the big screen. Hopefully Kubota have been running him into the ground today, and no doubt his back, his knee, and the rest will be pretty sore. So sorry to hear that, Bryn. But look, I lived with Bryn for about 3 years. Great man, great fun to live with. Messy, I mean, like, the word useless probably comes to mind a little bit. Like, I don't think you've ever seen how old he was, 29, 30-year-old man kind of get taught life lessons by myself and Tom Christie, who were 22 and 23 at the time, quite like it. But Bryn did teach us a few things as well. So I think it was a balanced environment to be in. And yeah, all I say is good luck to his lovely partner and how they're going. I'm sure he's improved.
Yeah.
But we did have some good times.
Oh, well, she's in for a lifetime, so,
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Okay, before we go, a player in your squad to watch out for?
I mean, there's always young guns coming through. I think someone who's been in and around the game for a couple of years is a guy, Jamie Henner, a lock. Got a bit of a taste last year and was pretty impressive. He's had a bit of a tough run with injuries. I think not going to be back till about March with his shoulder, but excited about what he can do A great blend of physicality, but also great skills as well, which is important in the modern game. So, one to watch out for when he comes back, big Jamie Henner.
There's a squad being selected for a World Cup, and the selectors come to you and say you're allowed to make 3 picks. Current player, former player, coach.
Okay.
Who would you want to take with you on the journey?
Past legends. I'll stick in the New Zealand game. I'm thinking of Jonah to start off with. Being a back 3 player as well, that probably reduces my chance of making the team by about 33%. Taking up a wing position with him, so as good as he would have been, I'll take him away. I'll go with
I think you're robbing Caleb Clark. I don't think you have to worry too much.
Oh, I don't know. I'll go with Dan Carter, I think. That 2015 final he played in, where he was able to get the team around the park, the drop goal, the end of a great career. So someone I've always admired, so I'll go with Dan.
Yep.
Current player, probably pretty hard to go past Adi Savea, the big pickup for Moana this year.
Yep.
Someone I've played a lot of rugby with, someone who leads through his actions, powerful, explosive, and makes timely plays. So give Adi the sniff. The coach, tempted to pick the current coach to get in his good books, but we'll stay clear of that. I'll go with my first 15 coach, Guy Reese Archibald. Was at Boys High. Just taught me a real passion for the game around backing yourself, backing your instincts. Always been willing to, play what you see and not necessarily rely on structure too much. So that'd be important in a big game. So we'll give a shout out back to the grassroots and go with Archie.
All right, he did a pretty good job there. You're going all right.
Yeah, well, we'll see. He had a pretty good track record, I think. He was at Paying Boys before that. Had the likes of Aaron Cruden and a few of those guys. So, hopefully he's happy with how I'm going. Probably get a text him around then to find out.
Well, he's up to the World Cup, so he's all right.
Yeah, true.
Awesome, mate. Hey, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. No dramas.
So, Will Jordan taught Bryn Hall a few life lessons along the way. Bryn, can you tell us which particular life lesson Will Jordan taught you that you've held most dear?
I couldn't actually tell you, Ross, what he taught me. I think it's more so maybe his golf tips, possibly. Outside his house, he did do a bit of chipping, so golf possibly. But to be honest, his partner, Mackenzie, pretty much did everything for him while we were there. So Tom and I would do all the other stuff around the house and being able to cook and whatnot. Will's just sitting on the couch and waiting for Mackenzie, his lovely partner, to do everything for him. So maybe that's something that I can learn from, Ross. Been able to not do things myself.
Speaking from experience, I do not suggest that.
We'll leave it at that. Thanks, Will.
I presume that when the toilet door opens, he takes his chance, goes in and owns the throne or something along those lines. He doesn't leave an opportunity going when it's a busy bathroom in the morning.
Absolutely not. He's first in there. Doesn't matter if you're waiting or not. He's ready to go. So, yep, that's a bit of Will for you.
But to be a little bit serious about the man, obviously one of the elite attacking rugby players in the world now and in professional history, given his strike rate of try scoring, when you looked at what he did in that game against the Hurricanes, whenever there was a moment in time, he pops up. And I'd love to talk about one, there was that first try to Preston where there were 2 inside runners and Will was one of them coming through Jipper.
Well, he's out the back and sort of and we've seen it before. Geordie Barrett's done a lot, but on the outside.
Yeah.
And slip between the forward that sort of stays straight rather than going for that tip line. But on this occasion, bit of width on the inside, and he just hit the gap. And I just think the ball was in 2 hands. I can't remember who was carrying it, but this body here was so engaged and obviously calling, and that created the space. And it was a nice little ball, and then a nice line, as Bryn would have loved, from Preston to sort of clean up and get the 5-pointer.
And what I also loved about, I think it was Cullen Grace, because there was the inside option to be able to open it up for Will on Cam Royard. I could be wrong, you might have to see the vision with it, but I think the animation in terms of to get that right, all parties have to be on the same page, because if you actually do probably look at that, Jip's got the example of talking around with Geordie Barrett, but defensively when you're seeing that coming back, it's usually out the back and you've got someone that's receiving that ball out the back, a 10 or a 15, and it's an inside or it's an outside ball, but they must have seen something in terms of being able to try and go through.
It's the little out carry, and then the inside player staying wide and again engaging that defender, and the out carry naturally takes, because not normally you can normally push off a defender and take that space, but because they were running so in sync and on that outline and created that gap, and he shapes that inside ball, what I think it's going to be more beneficial is how they evolve on that, because everyone's going to be looking for it now, and I think they may cram sides up quite in a tight bunch looking for that, and then it'll be the ball out the back to a sweeping Will Jordan like a Billy Slater, and it will just be a catch and pass like a 3-on-2 down the sideline. So, and then once teams adjust to that, then that's back on. May even just be a carry. It may be hit. Do you see how this one move now is going to have teams fixated? Okay, well, and there's a lot to think about, and if they can continue to keep the picture exactly the same and have variations off it, it could be a serious weapon.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we look at what the Highlanders did on the weekend, they brought in some serious weapons on paper. Probably not so much, but the way that they played together was quite outstanding. And I suppose there's a touch of an apology to make, because last week we didn't touch on the Highlanders quite as much as the fans would like. In fact, our comment section on YouTube was littered with people wondering whether we knew that the Highlanders existed, you know, whether they'd been maybe brought in and we've got a Matatu men's team or something.
It's a little bit unfair because we both sort of said they're a potential dark horse.
Yeah.
Okay, between the Tars and themselves, and also we noted that the captaincy. I think Jamie Jose chose the captain specifically for the actions man, like both actions men, but obviously Hugh will do the bulk of the talking, and Tawatawa Nawai almost has been inspired in his role moving into the midfield. And same reference 2015, it feels the same. Jamie Joseph is back. They are the underdogs. They actually like that. I think they like less chat about them, so they can get that chip on their shoulder and front up. And I mean, for the game they played, I think I was speaking to Hugh Renton after the game, and they know they lost that game. The Tars were there for the taking, but when it mattered in that last 20 minutes, the discipline just failed them, and it just allowed the Tars to sort of piggyback down the field, and then it was just a patience game. But also credit to Amone, who came off the bench on debut, scoring 2 tries, but having a hell of an impact for the Waratahs. And then Vailanu as well. I thought the reserve hooker who came on early, those 2 boys have got big futures. And if I was Joe Schmidt, I'd be looking at them seriously. Like they are a Safa more Xavier Numier-esque in terms of their way they can carry, but also deliver in their skill set and core roles. So opportunities presented, they took them, but I think the opportunities were presented by the Highlanders rather than, I suppose, the Waratahs blowing my socks off, as you'd say, because I was expecting big things from the Tars.
With the likes of Tupou, Gleeson, Bow and Leota, those 4 ball carriers, it looks like there's going to be a big DNA in around their collision area with those 4 guys, because when they're going good go-forward ball, they showed a little bit of attack. I thought they were a little bit, they held back a little bit. In the first half, they went a lot to their kicking game. It seemed like when they weren't getting any form of momentum, they went straight to their box kicks and being able to, I guess, smother them. And that probably actually led to the Highlanders being able to score off that counter-attack ability off the play. And Tangita, who I thought was outstanding on the weekend in terms of his running ability, they were able to score points more so off the Waratahs' mistakes. So I think the Highlanders, it was probably one that got away, I thought, as well. But I think to the credit for the Force and the Waratahs this week, they're able to get the job done in the last 20 minutes or the last moments of the game, which is a great advertisement, I guess, for the competition when the Australian teams are able to beat the New Zealand teams in the back end of the games.
The efficiency in the 22, they 75% in terms of their accuracy of getting points in the 22, the Highlanders. So attack-wise, they were right up there. 8 entries, 5 tries, and I know some come from turnover, but you still got to score them. So I do think their big focus will be just not pushing the boundaries defensively, because their defensive structure's fine. It's just when they piggyback teams up the field by trying too hard at that breakdown.
How did you think about Tawatawa Nawai's kicking game? It's something that I haven't seen in his game, obviously from the wing, but if he can continue to keep doing that, it's going to be massive for them.
Yeah, I think he's always been an option on the edge to kick, but not that efficiently. You definitely feel like he's been a little project in the off-season, and they've said, we're going to give you skipper, you're in at 12, we want that presence in and around 12. And he suits it because he's so defensively strong in terms of you're not really going to run down his channel. Well, I wouldn't, because he can hit you, get you to the ground and get a turnover. And you don't really want to go inside or out of him because he'll do the same thing. So it does force sides to go to that width. And as we always say, you've almost got to go through teams before you can go to that width. So I think it's a masterstroke in terms of the captaincy and him moving to the midfield.
What about Suali'i at fullback, Brenner? Are you happy with that, how that all went?
Look, I think the way that the Waratahs are using him, if you look in that first half, they use a lot of him aerially. And I think Jake Gordon, they have a big DNA in terms of going to that box kick. And look, there's a lot of times where he was able to get one-on-one. Sometimes he regathered, or there's probably a couple that he wanted back that he wasn't able to take on the full. But if they want to use him in that area, it's someone that's probably the best in the competition in terms of him having that NRL background to get in the air. Now, I would like to see him to be able to open up a little bit, and probably that's one thing that I saw with the Waratahs. If they can have that balance of the kick game, but then also his counter-attack ability, or being able to get him on the edge one-on-one. Like we probably saw with Moana Pacifica, I thought they did really well on the edges, being able to be really tight and then get the ball to the edge. So I think it was a great start in terms of using his attributes in the air. I'd just like to see the Waratahs use him a little bit more in terms of the attacking one-on-one, or being able to get him like a down line off the edge and being able to get into him in the game that kind of way.
I think they need to use him way more off that second forward pod. In terms of that sweeping motion, as we've just spoken about, Will, I know he went on the inside, but that sweeping motion on the outside, because I think their ball carriers are too predictable. Those 4 players you mentioned, they carry. And their pods are quite tight. And defensively, it's like, they're carrying, so it's a chop, tackle, hunt. They need to almost get some width in that so that it allows the threat of Joseph to come through here, or sweep out the back, and then it opens up tip opportunities. I think this whole idea of just compressing that pod and just crashing and bashing, well, it didn't work. Neither did the aerial game. I think they kicked too much as well, just relying on some sort of X factor to win the game. So I think he'll grow into that role. I still think it would be kinder to put him on the wing initially and put a Callaway at 15, but if they're going to use him at 15, you have to see him in and around that second pod. He has to be roving, because he'll take attention. And then if they spread that width, it's going to create better opportunities for Gleeson. Imagine Tupou on a down line. Gleeson stays square, he gives a little short ball to Tupou on a down line. I don't want any of that. Yeah. And then you've got Suoli'i coming around. They've got the bodies. I'm not sure I suppose Dan McKellar, in the way that probably the Brumbies ran things, is going to suit the athletes that they have at their disposal right now.
You know who reminded me of him with ball in hand? It was Karen Tamoifalau. Oh. The way that he runs with the ball for Moana Pacifica versus the Force, it looks like Suoli'i. It looks so easy.
Yeah, Tamoifalau sort of reminds me of Folau, Israel Folau. He's got such a tall profile. So good in the air. You saw that take that led to one of their tries. Phenomenal athlete. I think that back three, I thought, Willie Havili, some of his defence in the backfield, like the courage he's had, his kicking game, Jackson Guard and Bashett, when you thought they'd won the game, that little tip on when Tomatini scored that try, when you probably thought the game was put away. But there was a lot to like about Moana Pacifica's performance. And I think their forwards gave a great set piece. There'll be some work-ons in and around the tight stuff defensively and in attack, because they were the lowest lightning quick ball. They operated at 50%, which is normally actually quite good, but in comparison to the weekend, it was the lowest. So in terms of that carry clean and not having to spend too many numbers to give those players time, the more time they get, don't want to take away from Tamoifalau. He's a great athlete, but Willie Havili, man, his growth in the last 12 months has just been exceptional. His temperament, his game management, the way he sort of reads the game, but then the way he puts his body on the line defensively, I'm seriously impressed with how he's developed.
They would take a lot of positives. What I really enjoyed in that second half, their scrum dominance was unbelievable. And I know obviously the Force right now, they've had a lot of injuries in terms of having a couple of ACLs to their propping stocks, but you'd have to take a lot of confidence of those guys coming on to be able to have 4 or 5 scrum penalties in those big moments. Look, I thought their ability I know they didn't get as much game line success as the other teams, but they did really well in terms of being able to tighten teams up. And then when they did get the ball to the edge with the guys that we touched on, they were able to get in behind and have one-on-ones and been able to, make big inroads in terms of their attacking face play shape. So a lot to like, just really unfortunate the last 5 minutes that the Force came in with Peach and Donaldson, that one read really, and tired bodies. You could see it. I don't know if you saw Jip, but there were a lot of men trying their hearts out and showed a lot of care for the jersey, but it was just one little moment from Ben Donaldson in the 26th phase that the Force were able to get out of jail and win an unlikely win in the last 5 minutes, scoring 2 tries.
Don't you love adrenaline? Donaldson's ankle was strapped for 70 minutes of that game and he was hopping around, and then he gets an open space and he's gliding. But I do think the Havili Tamoifalau is a good example of what I'm trying to probably say with Suoli'i and Callaway.
Yeah.
I just think Callaway has had a lot of experience at 15. He is a very measured player. He's an X-factor player himself. And Tau Moiflau just holds that edge. You give him the ball, you give Suali'i that ball on the edge. I mean, he one-on-one, you're going to get him having the ball more often than, I suppose, hovering out the back, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I would use that.
Yeah, an absolute weapon. One of the interesting stats that I hadn't really come across, but trawling through the stats before the show today, which I thought was interesting considering the closeness of the competition, was number of points scored on average on entry into the opposition 22. And the Force were the best this weekend with an average of 4 per entry, whereas Moana Pacifica were down around about 3 where most of the teams were. So I suppose that's what goes to show in a close competition. You make the most of those opportunities and it's all yours.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the Force ones were earned in the 22, and I suppose if you look at a lot of Moana Pacifica's tries, sort of came in between the 22 and halfway. So I think we all know conversion rate in the 22 is massive. Every time you go in there, I think the most efficient was the Highlanders at 75%. So if they can keep that up, but I think all those sides that we're talking about that had, I suppose, good conversion rates, it was all from the other side's ill discipline, and it just comes back to discipline for me on defence. Every side. I think that discipline, giving penalties away, decided every game.
Yeah, speaking of that, I suppose penalties lead to lineouts. When you look at that Brumbies Drua game, the Brumbies had 19 lineouts to 11, and that could have been what ended it for the Drua.
Yeah, and it's two things. So I'll deal with their ill discipline that piggybacked the Brumbies up the field. I mean, I don't know what they had, but close to 70-75% of possession in that last 10 minutes, and it was all, they were in the Brumbies 22. It's like the old adage, just make them kick it out and we'll get a line out. Like, don't overplay it. But then a couple of good turnovers from the Brumbies, admittedly, went from line-outs. Piggyback down there, you know that's their DNA is around those maul tries, and that was the end of it. I still think, though, put that aside, it was a couple of times, and we've credited Lamani in previous seasons for really controlling his penalty mindset and knowing when to pull the trigger and not. I felt a couple of times when they were deep in their half and they'd been on defence, again he went for that quick tap and then he dropped the ball or it was stripped. And it's those decisions that just mount because, like tough conditions, humid, and you've got to go back on D, and it sort of deflates a team. And I know he's got that X factor and he can turn a game on its head, but I think he's just got to read when he's been on defence for a long period of time. Is a quick tap really necessary?
Yeah.
Because every time it ended in a turnover, and I think it was the discipline stuff towards the end, but I think a lot of those turnovers or missed opportunities to put pressure on the Brumbies earlier in the game cost them.
Could there be a more deflated team in the world than the Wales team right now? When you look at what's happened this week with Warren Gatland, we touched on it, but Warren Gatland's out and they've got a new coach come in, Matt Sherratt, who's got to turn this team around. He's from the Cardiff Blues and turn them around quickly. Have you been involved in something where that has happened, and how does that affect the squad?
I mean, we sort of touched on it last week, and I go back to if anyone's got the credit to withstand the pressure of this situation, and sometimes the fans have got to be realistic at I suppose the pathway system coming through. There's been big problems at their clubland, through strikes and all sorts, players not getting paid, and that's impacted in terms of on the top side and players looking to go to France and so forth. But if there was ever a coach that lives and breathes Welsh rugby, is being so successful, and if anything, should have the respect of the public. To know that he knows what he's doing, but he's doing the best with what he's got, is Warren Gatland. And I just think, and he's been pushed to step away, I just think it's a missed opportunity to set someone else up for success. This guy's going to get the same articles.
Yeah.
He's going to be written off in a week, 2 weeks. I don't even know, would you even apply? I don't know. It's almost like career over. I think it's so short-sighted, and I know that they're a passionate rugby country, but at some point you've just got to be realistic.
Yeah.
I don't even think it's the outcome. It's like you should look at it from the sense, like as individuals, we all make goals. you're not going to achieve everything, but when you look in the mirror and go, look, I've given everything possible to achieve it, I've fallen short, I can live with that, it not being so outcome focused. What I can't live with is just being everything's on outcome.
Yeah.
I don't know how the team environment was, but knowing Warren, he ticks every box in terms of that preparation to allow you to perform on the weekend. I would say they've probably been punching above their weight.
Yeah. It's rough. They're going into a game against Ireland, Bryn. Ireland.
What it can do, it can galvanise a group, and as a player, if I was in that group or, been in tough situations, there's only one way you're going to get yourself out of it, and it's the 23 or the 35 that are involved in that, to take some accountability and ownership to try and put in your best effort. And that doesn't come back to outcome focus. Are the critical few that you have for that test match, did we live those? Were we able to perform that at a high level that we were able to preview, and did we get that right and take away the outcome? Because, they're up against one of the best teams in the world. And so having really small goals and real small margins in terms of what it looks like as a success, in terms of what you have as a critical few, might be something that they look forward to, and it's not an outcome-based result business, unfortunately, which has been pretty tough for them at the moment.
There may be a lift in energy, but at the end of the day, you can't change a whole system in a week and expect to beat Ireland.
No.
They're hard enough to beat if you've got 4 or 5 weeks prep, let alone...
We've got 5 years of prep.
Yeah. And I mean, Warren did the right thing and stepped away while there was a week break to give them the best opportunity, but it's Ireland. If Ireland lose, there'll be some questions asked of them too.
There is no pressure on Wales, which is one thing that they could think about. There is no...
But has there been pressure? Has there been pressure? Have you seriously sat there and gone, oh, Wales are in this? Before a kick-off? Even against Italy?
No.
Has there been any pressure on them? I mean, the poor old pressure's been put on the coach.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of positives in terms of what they could feel, right? But we are clutching at straw. We are clutching at straws in terms of what form of positive that you can have at the moment. And the only thing that I could think of with them is that there's a new coach, hopefully a little bit of injection of something new, and they've got no expectations to go out there and win a game. So,
I think Ireland need to be careful though. They need to name their top side and do a job.
Yeah.
Don't start trying to chop and change. I think they should send a message.
Yeah, so plenty of good games this weekend in the Six Nations: Wales, Ireland, England, Scotland and Italy, France. Let's have a look at our Super Rugby tipping competition at tipping.super.rugby. 5
terrific
people went perfect, 5 from 5. Only the 5 people. I know I stuffed up the Blues and I stuffed up the Drua.
I don't even know what I got. I forgot to put my picks in. That is a first for me. My gosh. Couldn't believe it.
Fair enough. So the first up game this weekend is the Chiefs versus the Crusaders. Go to this QR code if you want to buy tickets to go to that game. Chiefs v Crusaders, what are you picking?
Oh, Chiefs. Chiefs at home.
Yeah.
I think the Crusaders are back, don't get me wrong, but I mean, as Bryn will know, he's been up to Hamilton. There's a bit of warfare between these two sides, and the Chiefs made a statement at Eden Park, and I just think home games are very important in this competition.
Yeah, look, I think obviously going to go to the Crusaders, but I think if they don't get that collision area right, if they're not to where the Chiefs were against the Blues, it will be a tough night for them because, yeah, I was very, very impressed in terms of what the Chiefs brought around that breakdown area.
Okay, Reds versus Moana Pacifica, Brenner.
I will go the Reds, but it's their first game, so the fact that it could be their first game, it might be a bit tough to get it going. And whereas the Moana have had their first game and have got that 80 minutes on the board, but I'll just go for the Reds in Brisbane.
Yeah, I can't say it's going to be the tightest competition. The Reds are going to feature in the top 6 and not pick them. So yeah. I think Moana, there's a lot to like, but again, it's going to be a big journey across there to top the Reds. And I think Les Kiss's second year, I think he'll have a number of tricks up his sleeve and they'll be in good order.
Canes v Drua?
Canes.
Canes? Same for you, Brenner?
Yep, Canes.
Landers v Blues?
Probably a little bit too hard. I think the Blues will be having a pretty good review with Vern, and they'll come back with a bit of a vengeance against the Highlanders.
I'll obviously go the Blues, but I think this is going to be tight.
Yeah, right. Brumbies and Force?
Brumbies.
Brumbies?
Brumbies.
So thank you very much again for joining us on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Please send us an email, aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz, or get into the comments section. We'll definitely have a look there. James Parsons, as ever, very happy to have you around. And Bryn Hall, we're just stoked that you're in one piece after Bryn Gatland ran through you. So
I'm happy as well. I'm happy I'm able to come here. So I don't know if I'll be able to come back after all the abuse I'm probably going to get after the show. So
thank you to everyone who helps us put the show together here at Sky. Please catch it anywhere you can. You can get it as an audio pod, you can get us on YouTube, across all of Sky's platforms. We'll catch you next time here on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Mā te wā.